Hello folks and welcome back to Mr. Buffalo's Study Corner. I am Mr. Buffalo or Mr. Jordan or Mr. Benyon depending on where I taught you. So today I'm going to talk through how to answer a GCSE question in English literature specifically related to Macbeth for the purposes of this. However, some of the techniques that I'm talking about you can still use for other sides. Today specifically we are looking at a Macbeth character question. So you can see here on this slide I've put the extract that is being used. So remember, in all of the exam boards they give you an extract and then they tell you to talk about the rest of the play as well. So if we go to the next slide, yes. So if we look at this slide, this is the question. It's related to the other section that we saw before, and it asks us to write about two things. So the first thing is that it says, starting with this conversation, explore how far Shakespeare presents Macbeth as a male character who changes during the play. Write about, number one, how Shakespeare presents Macbeth in this conversation, the extracts that we were given, and number two, how far Shakespeare presents Macbeth as a male character who changes in the play as a whole. So again, we have to think about the conversation itself, and we have to think about the play as a whole. Really, really important that we're doing this. You'll see the marks there. I know I'm blocking off slightly with my big head, but it's 30 marks, the question, and only section A, this is for AQA specifically, only section A is with the SPAG, with the 4 marks for spelling, punctuation, grammar, and just think about like your coherence, your sentence structures, they all come under SPAG as well. So let's move on and look at some tips on how to answer this question. Okay, so the first thing that I want to look at here is the mark scheme, just helping you to understand the mark scheme in general. So there's 4 different points, the assessment objectives that are looked at by the examiner. I know this is the very boring stuff, but it is important that you know and have it in your mind. And what I've done is I've broken it down very simply. Instead of you reading all of the mark scheme, we'll just look at the basic ideas. So AO1, basically, can you write an informed personal response? Is your response to the text, to the play, informed? As in, is it intellectual? Is it intelligible? Do you have a unique take on the play? Do you have a unique take on the character? It's not just a copy paste that you've learned from in class, and it's not just a copy paste that you've got from ChatGPT, for example. I'm not saying don't use ChatGPT to help you study. It's a very, very useful tool, and you should utilize AI in a way that benefits you. But don't remember the whole thing because it comes off as stiff, it comes off as robotic, and the examiner won't like that. So use it to help, use it to generate some quotes for you, use it to generate some ideas and some basic starters, for example. You can also check out my video on starters, but don't let it form everything, so don't remember the whole thing. Now, let's just very quickly run through these. So you've got the AO1, can you write an informed personal response? You've got AO2, can you analyze language, form, and structure? Hopefully you will have done that in class, language, form, and structure, and you should be able to identify what each of those things are. Very simply put, structure, how is it built? The sentences, the rhyming couplets, for example, the witches use rhyming couplets. Macbeth, when he's more evil, sort of slips into rhyming couplets as well. What form is it? Well, it's a play, so you should know that. But also form, think about register as well and what it's intended to do to the audience. What's the emotion that's coming across as well? And then structure, and then language. Language is all about emotion. So basically, if it's not structure and it's not form, it's language. So those are things like similes, metaphors, things that elicit responses from the audience. Emotive language has the word language in it. AO3 is about context. Not all exam boards utilize context. I'm using AQA here specifically. There are 2 exam boards that don't use it for every paper. They have it for a specific question. I'll do a video about the exam boards later on, but AO3 for AQA is specifically about context. So the context in which it was written, Shakespeare obviously was written in the Jacobean times. Women's rights, men's expectations, war, poverty, all of those contextual ideas, religion as well is a contextual idea, the divine right of kings, all very, very important. And as I mentioned before, AO4 is SPAG, spelling, punctuation, and grammar. How can you yourself build a coherent answer? Okay, so let's move on and have a look at some more breakdown. Yes, so this is just a very quick slide. I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's just to look at the assessment objectives for the grammar, for the SPAG that I was speaking about. You can see here it actually does specify. It's used, sorry, a little bit hard to do it with your mouse. You can see it's only for section A. So once you've got it down for section A, it doesn't really matter. You can just get that done for section A. High performance, basically, learners spell, it says learners spell and punctuate with consistent accuracy, consistently use vocabulary. What they mean by that is sophisticated vocabulary. You're not just using very basic words like Macbeth was sad. We're using words like melancholic instead. We're using high level vocabulary. You want to be aiming for a 4, really, or at the very, very least, you should be aiming for a 3. Obviously, aim higher. You won't be disappointed then if you come out with a 2 or a 3 for that assessment objective. Intermediate, it's sort of the same. It's just considerable range of vocabulary instead of like effective use, effective control of vocabulary. It's just okay vocabulary. And then threshold is the basic. Have you used a reasonable range? It's okay. It's standard. That is the students who will use things like Macbeth was sad that his wife died, instead of saying something like melancholy began to seep in as Macbeth became aware of the gravity of the situation involving his wife's suicide and his impending doom, for example. I know I'm an English teacher. I know that not everybody speaks like that. Totally understand it. 2 things you can do: read more. I know that isn't going to be super helpful because there's so many people that don't enjoy reading and also just struggle to get into something. I totally get it. I'm going to do a video specifically about reading later and some of the things that you can do if you don't enjoy reading, because there are tactics, there are things that you can do to get into reading something, to understanding different vocabulary, even if you don't want to pick up a full book like Lord of the Rings. I totally get it. I used to read a lot, and I still do, but when I was, in high school, there were other things going on that take precedence. So I understand. So we'll do a video about that. But yeah, do try and aim for this top band, because you can do it. English is a great subject for one specific reason. It's making stuff up and then proving it. All you need to do is speak coherently, have a good idea, and write it down. Honestly, the easiest subject you can pass if you put your mind into it, which I know you can with my channel. Okay, and then another part of the mark scheme, you can see here we've looked at AO4, and this is the rest of it. So this is AO1. We are talking about, this is for both, by the way, not just the first bullet point or second bullet point, it's for both. The examiners are encouraged to reward any valid interpretations. So even if what you want to write isn't here, the examiner still can make up their mind to give you something depending on what you write. As long as it's unique, as long as it's thoughtful, as long as it's inspired, none of this, Macbeth was sad, Macbeth was a weird dude, proper, insightful, intelligent answers. We've got some things, so we need to have comments on Macbeth in the extract. That is a non-negotiable, and comments on Macbeth in other parts of the play before he appears, at the end of the play, for example. You need those because it does speak about that in the second bullet point. AO2, language used to present Macbeth's despair at this point. Think about your PEEL, your Peel paragraphs. We need to be able to prove it. Soliloquies to reveal Macbeth's character and his inner thoughts, very, very important. His changing relationship with Lady Macbeth. We're going to do another video another day, which will be about his relationship with Lady Macbeth. I guess we'll take that as a theme question instead, as in it's what is the relationship like between the two and how does it change? It's a really important question actually that comes to mind. Is Macbeth manipulated, or does he just use Lady Macbeth as a catalyst for his own desire? Like, does he just use it as an excuse, essentially? Her ambition, her over-ambition, perhaps, which essentially spells her doom and his doom at the end of the play. And AO3 is your context. So we've got, the use of violence in the context of war to fulfill his ambition. So you can see it's actually the context of the play as well, context of war and ambition. Just a quick note here, don't go off on a tangent. I know right now there's a lot of things going on in the world. If you want to speak about them in other subjects where it's relevant, like history perhaps, or global perspectives, anything like that, you can. Ethics, for example, you can. I would avoid going off on a tangent here because we're supposed to be talking about a play, a specific play. So don't start talking about, Israel, Palestine, Russia, Ukraine, etc., any World War II, whatever. Don't start doing that here. Keep it within the context of the play. The role of witches in the supernatural, particularly in the time. Remember as well, there are two audiences here, which is interesting and always worth mentioning. You have the Jacobean audience during Shakespeare's time, and you have the modern audience, you, me, the modern audience who are reading it from a very different perspective. Macbeth's attitude to religious issues at different points. And then we've got also the kingship and the expectations thereof. Duncan and Macbeth, very, very different kings. Why? What's the reason for that? What are the expectations? Could Macbeth not meet those expectations? Was he overwhelmed? Was he a victim perhaps of the expectations of masculine society at the time, or the societal expectations of masculine men at the time? Was he expected to be a good leader when the reality was he was actually more suited to be a soldier? This is what I mean by context. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so what do we know about Macbeth? This is the most important thing that we can think about at this point. So this is our planning. Obviously, in your exam, you're not going to have time, or you'll have a very small amount of time just to quickly jot some things down, perhaps annotate the extracts that you've been given, write around it. So what do we know about Macbeth already that you should have learned in class, or that you are learning right now if you're in year 10 and already doing your preparation? In which case, props, I see you, you're working hard, keep going. That's the way to do it. Slow and steady wins the race. Unless you're a tortoise. No, wait, the tortoise still did win. Literature. Yeah, so what do we know about Macbeth? Well, two things. The question is actually directing us to 2 points. So we know he's a male. It specifically says he's a male character that changes throughout the play. So we need to make sure that we reference that. Why is that important? Clearly the exam board, the examiner wants us to mention he's a male character who changes. Okay. How does he change? There is a clear progression here as well. So Act 1, he's described as brave, noble. And this, by the way, we see before we even meet him. So we see that Macbeth, by the captain, is described as brave and noble. He's described as befitting of the title of Thane of Cawdor. He comes across as quite confident, but then he starts to change. Okay, in Act 2, he becomes hesitant. His wife's talking about killing the king so that he can take power. Remember, the witches have given the prophecy, if you want to call it a prophecy or a vision at this point. But equally, he's conflicted between being loyal. Sorry, my video's blocking that there, but that says paranoid in Act 3. He starts to become paranoid after the murder. Remember his dinner party scene? He starts to have hallucinations. He does start to become paranoid that people are out to get him. And that progresses as well when he starts to worry about the forest marching on him. He's still trying to be moral for a lot of the play. So there are some things where he still does try to maintain his original character, but because of the ambition, because of what he's done, it does change him as a character. In Act 4, he's described as a tyrant, and he displays tyrannical behavior, definitely. And in Act 5, he definitely comes across as that broken man who gives up, really. The out brief candle speech. You know, she should have died hereafter. Even before that, when he's speaking to Seward, there's an element of him giving up. But equally, there's also an element, we'll look at this in a minute, there's a lot of conflict. So he is realistically a very conflicted character. Is he conflicted because he's expected to do a lot of things as a man, perhaps that he's not suited to do? There is a very, very good essay. I can't remember which scholar wrote it. I don't know if scholar is the right word, which essayist wrote it. And it's about masculinity. And is Lady Macbeth perhaps more masculine than Macbeth himself? It's a very important question to ask. And this is the type of thing that they will want you to ask. Now, I'm talking about Lady Macbeth and Macbeth together and the different ideas. This is a question specifically about Macbeth, so we need to make sure that's our core focus. Does that mean that we can't bring in other characters who affect him? No, of course we can. Lady Macbeth is a huge catalyst for his change. He's hesitant because of what she's saying. He references her pouring poison into his ears, or she references it, pouring poison into his ears. Clearly, he is a man that can be manipulated. Perhaps, well, manipulated might not be the right word, depending on how you view Macbeth's actions. Was it his fault? Was it Lady Macbeth's fault? Was it both of their faults? Did he just use her as an excuse to do the unspeakable acts? Remember as well, regicide, killing a king at the time, was a huge no-no. Where did you go if you killed a king? Straight to hell. So, all really, really important things. Let's move to the next slide. These are things that we need to know. Now let's have a look. How do we use that knowledge? Well, firstly, go in order. The first bullet point is the first bullet point. Do the text first. Read through the text first. Analyze the text first. And use the text you've been given to make your first few points before you go into any detail about the rest of the play. This will be easier for you, and it will make a clear, coherent pattern. I always feel like they put the extract first because they want you to talk about that first. I would go with that. Yeah. In the extract, there's always going to be something that is super evident. So for me, the first thing that popped out here is that this extract is one about despair, also about conflict, but it's definitely about despair. A line that popped out to me here is, "I have lived long enough." Like he's appeared to have reached the point of sort of nonchalance regarding his existence. Nonchalance, by the way, means indifference, uncaring, so not caring if he lives or dies. That was the first thing that popped out to me. So there'll always be something that will pop out to you where you go, yes, okay, this is about this. And run with it. Your answer is not wrong. There are no wrong answers here. As long as you can prove it, English doesn't have a wrong answer. Okay, that being said, there is still a conflict here. So yes, he's given up, but equally, he's not given up. He will still fight. There's still some loyalty and still some valor left in him. He's unwilling to give up the fight. I'll fight till from my bones my flesh be hacked. That still obviously is quite a confrontational possibly even sort of suicide mission type language, but there's still nothing that he's still saying that he'll still fight until the end. I don't know how you want to see that. You could argue both ways. You could argue that he's at the point of no return, essentially. He just thinks that he's got to keep going and going and going until he dies. Or you could argue there is an element of loyalty and bravery still left over in him. We could argue that Macbeth doesn't change that much, but we could also argue that Macbeth changes incredibly. So this is a really, really interesting quote to break down. And another thing that popped up to me here was how he's trying to control the uncontrollable. So he's talking about Lady Macbeth, and he says to his aide, essentially, cure her of that. When he's talking about her having this mental instability, he literally says, cure her of it. Raise out the troubles of the brain. How can you do that? And this is in a time where, depression, anxiety, guilt, they weren't studied psychologically as much as they are today. So the idea here is that he's literally just saying, get rid of it. The only possible way you could even think about getting rid of it at the time would probably be a lobotomy. I'm not sure a lobotomy during Macbeth's time, even Shakespeare's time, would be particularly safe. And we probably didn't have the right tools to do it as such. And also probably didn't have enough understanding of anatomy or psychology. So yeah, he speaks with imperatives, he's commanding like he was at the beginning, but equally, these issues are beyond human intervention. These are psychological, deep, cutting issues that he's thinking he can resolve like a soldier. It's not possible. So very, very interesting, conflicting character, Macbeth. And then once you've done enough of the extract, and you think you've done, I usually say about 2 to 3 points for the extract, 3 probably being the better, maybe 3 to 4 if you're more confident in it. 3 to 4 points from the extract, and then 2 to 3 from the rest of the play. I'd always go 3 and 3, 3 from the extract, 3 from the play. Balance, examiners like the balance of that. That's 6 Peel paragraphs, an introduction and a conclusion, so you're looking at 8 paragraphs really. That's going to take you some time, so make sure that you know and you've practiced writing this. Hopefully your teacher's planned for class practice, for individual questions, and in a time setting. The only real way to do this in English is to make time to practice. Otherwise, you just don't know. It's not like another exam like science or maths where the answers are right or wrong and you'll know them or you won't. Here, with the exceptions of theories in science, here it's all theoretical. It's just how you prove it. So the rest of the play, do try to connect it with what you've identified in the extract. So try to make a connect. That cohesion, that flow, that fluidity of your answer is what the examiners really, really like. There's obvious conflict between 2 versions of Macbeth. The brave, noble Macbeth and the overwhelmed, super anxious, melancholic, given up version of Macbeth. So really important to discuss both. The captain at the beginning, he does refer to Macbeth as brave. Well, he deserves that name, meaning Thane of Cawdor. But then equally in Act 3, Lennox begins to refer to Macbeth as a tyrant, showing how even others, like I said, you can use others to demonstrate your point. Others actually see a change in Macbeth too. It isn't just him. Others are seeing it. Lady Macbeth, she questions his manhood. She questions, are you not the brave man I married? Lennox questions, well, is he a tyrant? He refers to the tyrant's feast, actually, who was present at the tyrant's feast. Different people question him. Macduff calls him, I can't remember the exact word, I'll have to go back and check it, but he refers to him as a maniac, essentially, someone who's bloodthirsty, someone, they're referring to him as evil, basically. Remember as well, Macbeth does send assassins, paid assassins, to kill Banquo and Fleance. Fleance does escape, but he also sends these assassins to kill Macduff's family. So, and we're talking about young, like his wife and his young children. So, really important, really, really important piece. Do remember, you will need to use the Peel structure. Some schools just call it a PEE. They don't necessarily bother with the link. More and more that is changing in different schools, particularly schools that are aiming for higher grades. I mean, look, every school's aiming for higher grades. What I mean is schools that have reputations to uphold for those higher grades. In depends where you are. You know, in London, you've got your GDST schools, the private schools, which are always coming out with basically 8s and 9s for every student, with very few exceptions. And then you have maybe in Liverpool, I can't think of examples off the top of my head. I know Rainford generally in Merseyside comes out with 6 to 9s. So schools are looking for those top grades. So they are more now starting to use Peel more commonly. It depends on your set as well. I know that sometimes, you know, if you're in, say, set 5, set 6, and that's not to disparage, you know, some people just are better at maths or PE or technology or whatever it might be. Perhaps your teacher might make a consideration that PEE is easier for you, which is fine. In that case, run with what your teacher is telling you. They do know you better, but your school probably is running with Peel. So what is your main argument? What do you want to say? Evidence, you need to find a quote to support it. That can, obviously it needs to be from the extract. You need to prove you've read the extract. You need to explain the quote. Why is it important or significant to the point that you've made? And then link it back to the question as well. Not your point, but to the question itself. Macbeth is a man who has changed. Possibly link it to context if you can. You don't have to do that for every single, you do have to link for every single point. You don't have to link to context for every single point. Some people find that easier. Some people find it harder. So as long as you've got some context in there, it will be okay. Right, so let's have a look then at some model answers. So for this, I'm not going to put my face because I don't want to block the section down here. So the model answer, very, very important. Now, remember that there was a video I did which was about starters. So you've got here, is Macbeth truly a tyrant or a victim of expectant masculinity? Now this is your juicy question, your hook, to get your examiner really thinking about your idea. Okay, they're hooked in. Remember as well, the best advice I ever got was, imagine your examiner is a 90-year-old dodderer who is reading 1,000 exams that all say the same thing. You need to stand out. Simple as. Be the weirdo with the crazy answer that really hooks the guy in. In this case, I'm talking about masculinity. This would be a grade 9 answer. I'll show you one slightly different in a moment because this is a little vocabulary heavy that you might not feel comfortable with, which is fine. I'll show you one that's slightly less in a minute, that's still a grade 9 but isn't as overworked. So you've got that hook, and then we sort of answer our own question. At the beginning of the play, Macbeth is introduced as a valiant, honourable warrior, praised for his bravery in battle. He is the figure of masculinity and what is expected of a man at the time. We're actually adding in a little bit of context before we even go into the evidence. However, in this moment, he admits that he is sick at heart and laments that his way of life is fallen into the sere, the yellow leaf. It's your evidence. Yes, you can use more than one piece of evidence, it's fine. If you feel comfortable, this is all about how you feel. Using a metaphor of withering autumn leaves to reflect his sense of decay and emptiness. Explanation. Still continuing with the explanation. This shows a stark contrast to the youthful, ambitious figure we first encountered, so we're referencing change. Now Macbeth is acutely aware of the consequences of his actions. He acknowledges he will never have honour love, obedience, troops, or friends. Only curses and false flattery, which is mouth honor. That's what that means. So people giving him mouth honor but not actually protecting him or giving him true compliments, essentially. It's like being two-faced. Despite this recognition, he clings desperately to action and violence as a coping mechanism, demanding, "Give me mine armor," even though Satan tells him, it was Satan, not Seward, sorry. Satan tells him it's not needed yet. This compulsion for control also extends to his wife, as he begs the doctor to minister to a mind diseased and cleanse the stuffed bosom of that perilous stuff. Macbeth's command, you could use imperative perhaps here, to pluck from the memory a rooted sorrow reveals his desire to medically erase guilt and trauma, showing how psychologically broken he has become. Through this scene, Shakespeare powerfully illustrates Macbeth's transformation from noble hero to tyrannical, hollow shell, a man undone by his ambition and haunted by his crimes. So let's have a look at one that's a little less quotation heavy. Right, so immediately you'll see that that's less wordy. Don't worry too much about word count. There's no real thing. Unless you're waffling for like 10 pages, it's not really important. 1.5, 2.5 pages, generally, depending on your writing size, is more than enough. So this is still top band. It's still a grade 9. Shakespeare presents Macbeth as a man who is emotionally exhausted and aware of his own downfall. That's your bold statement. Remember, we got juicy question, bold statements. In this moment, he reflects that he has lived long enough, and that his way of life has fallen into the sere, the yellow leaf, a metaphor suggesting he feels dried out and past his prime, like a dying leaf in autumn. This shows a stark contrast to the confident warrior seen earlier in the play, still using good language like stark contrast. Now Macbeth realizes he is left with curses and mouth honor instead of honor, love, obedience, highlighting his isolation and loss of genuine loyalty. Yet despite this despair, he still clings to violence, commanding, "Give me my armor," which reflects his need to maintain control. Shakespeare uses this tension to show how Macbeth has changed. He is no longer driven by ambition, but desperation, fear, and a refusal to accept defeat. So we've still got P-E-E-L, which is really, really good. It's not as wordy, it's not as long, it's not as quote heavy as the other answer, but it's still an exceptional answer. So don't worry if your teacher's telling you to write way too much. It's all about what you feel comfortable with. Okay, so let's have a look at how we include the rest of the play, because that's just from the extract. Okay, so throughout the play, Shakespeare shows Macbeth's masculinity as something unstable and easily corrupted by ambition. At the start of the play, Macbeth is described as brave Macbeth and valor's minion, praised for his battlefield courage and loyalty to Duncan. However, the witch's prophecy and Lady Macbeth's manipulation, he begins to act on ambition rather than honor. This is evident when he murders Duncan, an act that horrifies him at first. He says his bloody instructions return to plague the inventor. It's interesting that he uses inventor, because we could argue that realistically the idea came from either the witches or even Lady Macbeth. But again, it's that question, is Macbeth the one that's responsible? The guilt he feels marks the beginning of his inner decline, that conflict that we spoke about. As the play progresses, Macbeth becomes desensitized to violence, shown when he orders the killing of Banquo and Macduff's family without hesitation. Remember as well, Banquo's supposed to be his best friend, or his closest ally, at least. By the end, he says, "Life is a tale told by an idiot," showing that his ambition has left him emotionally numb. Shakespeare uses Macbeth's journey to critique ideas of masculinity, suggesting that a man who suppresses emotion and pursues power at all costs ultimately destroys himself. That is a fantastic P-E-E-L paragraph. And that idea of masculinity, by the way, is something that an examiner would love to see, because you're talking not just about the play, but you're also using a contextual idea of what masculinity means to actually discuss this play in a very emotionally intelligent way. And that's what we're looking for. So I really, really hope that this helped you. It's a long video, and if you've stuck with it, thank you so much. Every single second that you're on my videos, I appreciate you more than you can imagine, and I really hope that I can help you out with your GCSEs. Now, please feel free to go back, pause the video where you need, check out the answers, check out any parts, keep replaying it, have it on in the background while you're exercising or doing something else or walking outside, whatever you need. Have this on, just try and take it in. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments, and I will see you again soon in Mr. Buffalo's Study Corner.